Greetings once again, dear listener, and thank you for listening to Republic Broadcasting Network. I'm Bruce G. McCarthy, your host for the next hour, and you are listening to Datum Line. In our previous Datum Line broadcast, entitled Dictatorship of Debt, Part 8, we continued our challenge that free enterprise capitalism was not rescued from the Great Depression of the 1930s by President Roosevelt's socialist New Deal programs. Free enterprise capitalism was already on its deathbed by 1934, reeling from highly toxic megadose bank credit therapy that would signal its end by 1968 after enduring a century-long assault by the shamans of central banking. Today's message picks up where we left off in our efforts to apply common sense in defining an economic system that no longer exists under a constitution we abandoned long ago, as well the principles of Scripture, while using an economics vocabulary that has been reduced to sheer nonsense. Later, we will relate free enterprise, capital, and capitalism to the false paradigms propagated by media and academia, which both employ a vague and meaningless vocabulary to perpetrate an incredible mind game. Modern economics is one very powerful mind game, played upon innocent, unsuspecting students by a cadre of pathological liars. In earlier Datum Line broadcasts, we quoted some of America's more candid economists who admitted their inability to define our most common and elementary economic expressions, words like money and dollar. As a result, they cannot define the interrelated expressions credit, debt, cash, currency, or bill of credit, legal tender, pay, paid, payment, or the word note, as it applies to the Federal Reserve System. And without an accurate definition by which to tie these words down, it is impossible to unravel the greatest criminal confidence game played upon mankind in human history. But if our society is no longer willing to accept moral absolutes regarding human behavior, why would they appreciate a vocabulary of rigid interpretation? You've probably noticed the increasing level of confusion among our media-saturated population, who demonstrate a ready willingness to supply authoritative opinions about subject matter they know little about, eagerly using words they cannot define. But perhaps we're all guilty of this in one way or another. Rational thought has become increasingly subordinated to volatile emotionalism. Is this an accident, or was it planned? See how quickly some of us jump into the deep end of the pool, rather than wade cautiously into a subject from the shallow end. We've been conditioned to avoid asking simple-sounding questions or admitting ignorance for fear of humiliation. Modern education subjects us to 12 or more years of mind-altering ridicule from arrogant classmates, operating in concert with a few condescending teachers. Some of them became gladiators in mainstream media, exerting the same influence upon viewers who dread the embarrassment inflicted upon them by those sneering experts at the deep end of the pool who pretend to know what they do not understand. You can probably think of a few personalities on certain broadcasting networks. I won't call them by name. Okay, so today's message we'll call Dictatorship of Debt, Part 9, in our ongoing series on economics. Here's our music. This is our first break. I'm Bruce G. McCarthy, and you are listening to Datum Line. Welcome back to this segment of Datum Line, and if you're just joining us at this juncture, I'm Bruce G. McCarthy, your host, and today's message is entitled Dictatorship of Debt, Part 9. How many parts there are going to be to this series? I don't even know. I'm reminded of two different replies to a letter that I had sent to the Bahamas Development Bank while I was vacationing on the island of Eleuthera, a beautiful island, by the way, over 30 years ago. It was a carefully constructed request for the definition of the word dollar, and you're probably almost sick and tired of me talking about this word. But I wanted to know what the definition of this word was as applied to Bahamian dollar-denominated banknotes. And I was met with genuine interest from a senior-ranking bank official who was unable to answer the question and admitted as much. So he forwarded my letter up the line to the deputy governor of the central bank, who likewise could not answer the question, although he did not inform me of his inability. He simply forwarded it to the governor of the central bank. Now it's the governor whose signature appears on all Bahamian central bank notes that circulate in the Bahamas. His reply? The answer to my question, he said, could be found in, quote, any elementary economics textbook, end quote. So what the first and the second high-ranking bank officials could not answer, he absolutely refused to even address. You know, there doesn't seem to be any shortage of monetary experts lounging around the diving board at the deep end of the pool in sleek, form-fitting swimsuits. But very few of them want to be seen wading in the kiddie pool, where the water level of embarrassment can quickly rise over our heads. For instance, one rather outspoken critic of the Federal Reserve System, who has produced more than one rather polished-looking video documentary about banking, was confronted by an author on monetary issues, who happens to be a friend of mine. And this was not long ago. My friend asked for the definition of the word dollar. Oh, isn't it sickening, huh? It's a simple question, though, right? And the answer can be found in any elementary economics textbook, right? After repeating the question, this well-known speaker, at least in populist circles, replied, quote, I don't know, end quote, and immediately left the room. Now, perhaps the answer was not so surprising in this modern age of highly educated experts, many of whom are found in the field of personal health care. Ask an AMA-licensed physician to identify the cause of cancer, and the AMA-approved reply will be, we don't know. But fear not, they're going to treat you anyway. But if we step outside the box for just a moment, you know, the orchestrated paradigm, doesn't it seem reasonable that a cure for cancer can only be found in the understanding of what causes cancer? We're talking about a disease, you understand. We're not talking about broken bones, which might have been caused by falling off a church steeple. Broken bones are obviously not cured by treating steeples. If the engine of your car developed a bad oil leak, evident by the large pool of oil on your garage floor, would you ask a mechanic to treat the symptoms, or would you want him to treat the cause? An allopathic AMA approach might be to design and install an elaborate recirculation system to catch the leaking oil and pump it back into the engine. It should only cost $1,000 or so. It won't cure the leak, of course, but it will prevent any more pooling of oil on your garage floor. An alternative approach might be to replace the oil pan gasket, thus eliminating all symptoms, while curing the problem at the same time. But you see, to our modern-day allopathic mindset, that's just too simple. Our nation's economic health has been treated much the same way by experts trained in what I'll call allopathic economics. They're trained to treat the symptoms and ignore, at all costs, the cause which lies outside the box of false paradigms designed to protect and enhance the criminal confidence game of the banking cartel. In fact, false paradigms are used to protect all kinds of cartels, one of which is the medical cartel. Contrary to allopathic economics, applied to our global economic epidemic, if you'll excuse my medical illusion, a cure will never be found by treating the symptoms of rising unemployment, increasing bureaucracy, runaway inflation, the clever white-collar crimes on Wall Street, and so forth. Nor are all of these the natural shortcomings of a free market economy in desperate need of more federal regulation or eventual nationalization, contrary to the prevailing allopathic socialist mindset. alternative, and by that I mean biblical, economics can answer what allopathic economists, and economics cannot or will not. But practitioners and patients alike cannot and will not accept the simplicity of natural remedies, which are, in their operation, far more complex and effective than what initially appears on the surface. For those who are blessed with that rare commodity that was once called common sense, the absolute bottom line cause for our economic insanity is the wholesale violation of every economic principle in Scripture. But our highly educated engineers of the global agenda, steeped in secular humanism, which is the worship of man, particularly elite man, are not the least bit interested in this fact. What may surprise you, though, is that a growing number of Federal Reserve critics who demand what they call honest, constitutional, debt-free money are not interested in honest, constitutional, or biblical debt-free money either. All of this is provable if you will expend the time and energy needed to simply define the words they use, because they certainly have not bothered to do so. I mean absolutely no offense to their many followers, but please take note of the fact that your front men are unrelenting in their push for a Marxist solution to a grievous problem rooted in socialist ideology. And to err on only one point of their Marxist mantra might be forgiven temporarily and corrected eventually. But to be flat out wrong on 4 out of 4 is cause for alarm. Who is ultimately behind their assault upon the Constitution, Scripture, the English language, and even common sense? You know, the civil rights and the anti-war protest movements of the so-called left are used to conceal a hidden agenda which is not suspected by their innocent underlings. But for so-called right-wing and populist sympathizers to think that they cannot be redirected by a hidden agenda is sheer folly. We'll cover this facet of America's false economic paradigm in more detail as we move further into our present Datum Line series. Meanwhile, returning to the subject of free enterprise capitalism and false paradigms, I should explain, for new listeners at least, why so much attention is being given to false paradigms, or what some would call the Hegelian dialectic process as applied to criminal politics and criminal economics, of which these two expressions, free enterprise and capitalism, form an integral part. The answer is simple. For perhaps a century or more, the American public has been told, in essence, that only by increasing government regulation can we hope to bring peace and harmony for the common good of mankind, you understand, by correcting the many flaws inherent to a free enterprise capitalist system. What I hope to prove, however, and may, for some listeners, I may have already proven in previous messages, is that these alleged flaws are both attributable and indigenous to the system of bank credit, which has, from our nation's beginning, operated in antagonism to free enterprise capitalism. You see, banking violates every economic principle of Scripture, is therefore inherently unlawful, and cannot possibly be compatible with a Christian free enterprise economic system. Yeah, I know. To most Americans, even to most pastors and mainstream Christians, this may seem ludicrous. They don't even think the Bible has anything to say about economics. And life without banking would, to them, be a life not worth living. Why? Because banks are the modern facilitators of the American dream.